So now you can see the painting during this process of retouching, but really our approach is trying to honor and respect the history of the painting, really leave those deliberate brushstrokes visible as much as possible, even the wear and abrasion to the painting, and also those changes that are really quite crucial to understanding this painting more. Hello and welcome. Today we're going to be talking to you about this painting, The Finding of Moses by Orazio Gentileschi, and it's currently undergoing a conservation treatment which is involving removing older layers of varnish and restoration. We also did some minor structural work on the painting, and we're in the process now of filling and retouching the losses. This painting was actually acquired in 2019, quite recently, and that was done with the help of the nation. It's been in the conservation studios only for a short time, since the start of 2023. And something quite interesting about this painting is that it's really the small details that we've been focusing on, isn't it? Even though it's one of our largest paintings in the collection. So who is Orazio Gentileschi? He was a really popular and well-known artist from Tuscany. And we know he worked for the court of King Charles I. In fact, he was probably one of the favorite painters for Queen Henrietta Maria. And they commissioned this painting to sort of celebrate and honor the birth of their son, the future King Charles II, who was born in 1630. As you can tell, it's a really large painting. It's 2.5 meters by 3 meters. And so it's required a real team of us to be working on it. So that team of conservators is myself, Marek, Silvia, and also Paul Ackroyd. And then we've also had a group of colleagues from the scientific department helping us, which has been led by Marta. So Marek, can you tell us a little bit more about how something this big even came to be, how it was constructed?
So those larger pieces of canvas were stitched together from smaller individual pieces, and width of those individual pieces were at the time maximum around a meter. There is a very good practical reason behind that, and that is that one single worker behind wooden loom was able to throw a shuttle with the yarn across from one side of the loom to another. So those individual canvases were prepared and stitched together from the reverse, and the stitching goes from the reverse and it goes also from the front, which provides much stronger bond. So this canvas was then stretched over a strainer, and as you can see, so the stitching is from the back, so there is some buildup of the material, but the front was meant to be more or less plain, and on that front, the ground and subsequently paint layers were applied by the artist. However, as we can see from the front, those seam became visible, and that is during the past lining treatments. When new piece of canvas was attached from the reverse, that seam, which was bulking from the reverse, was pushed to the front together with this allowance canvas in here. And that actually is now becoming more visible as we see the painting.
Silvia, could you tell us a little bit more about the composition itself?
So the painting is the finding of Moses, the Old Testament story, and we can see Pharaoh's daughter and her ladies in waiting finding Moses in a basket. He had been left there by his mother, the red figure, and his sister Miriam kneeling.
So the costumes that the figures are wearing, it's not what you'd expect for ancient Egypt, is it?
No, absolutely. It doesn't look like ancient Egypt at all. And they wear these amazing courtly dresses. And specifically, Orazio Gentileschi was really great and amazing in painting these luxurious fabrics, as we can see on this purple Tagliante dress, where we can see purple and blue, for example.
Wonderful. And is that meant to be the River Nile in the background, do you think?
It is supposed to be, but it's actually probably the Thames. As we can see, this is a very particular British landscape with trees and grass, and the painting was probably painted for the Queen's House in Greenwich with the predetermined settings next to windows, and that's why the purple figure is pointing out of the window, probably pointing at the River Thames out of Greenwich.
There is another version of this composition by Orazio that's currently at the Prado Museum in Madrid. But both paintings were made in London sometime between 1630 and 1633. And that's the date when the second version of the painting was sent to Spain for King Philip IV's son. So both paintings were kind of made in honor of a son being born, so Charles II and Balthazar Carlos. The sort of right-hand side of both paintings are quite different from each other, but on the left-hand side, the 6 figures on the left are really similar between the two paintings. Some aspects are nearly identical, but the Prado version is a little bit smaller, so that's slightly different scale for the figures. So something that we know about Orazio's technique is that he often reused figures or transferred designs or parts of designs between successful compositions. And we think that's the case here, don't we? That there is possibly some use of that, but we're looking into it a little bit more in detail. Something that we do know is that there are a large number of changes that happened during his creative process that we really can see in our National Gallery painting. And that's something that became much more evident with the cleaning, didn't it, Marek?
Absolutely, yes. Those changes, they either peak through the layers naturally, and that is during the increased transparency of the paint itself, but also some of those changes became more visible through paint layers due to past treatments or due to abrasion to the uppermost layers of the paint. So one of those changes which became really, really strikingly obvious was quite in the middle of the composition, where we can see that the hand of one of the central figure has been altered, at the position of the fingers was initially planned and painted in a different direction. But also one of the major changes was positioning of the head of Miriam, and that is that initially her head was more tilted towards the pharaoh's daughter, and then Orazio changed his conception and then he moved it a little bit towards her mother's garment. Then we can see that actually the red color of the Miriam's mother and Moses' mother, it goes directly underneath the face of Miriam.
And a lot of this, like you said, was really disguised by that restoration in the 1990s. That restoration was less sympathetic to the painting. We found during cleaning that there were areas of original paint, fragments, especially along the bottom of the painting, that had been covered up with restoration. So we wanted to undertake this treatment to do a restoration that was much more sympathetic to the painting. We are trying to kind of honor the history of the painting and the evidence of wear and even abrasions to the painting, but we're also trying to make more visible these changes that are such an interesting aspect to the painting as well. Also, it helps that the painting is, a major acquisition for the gallery, and it has a lot of historical significance. So all those were factors in undertaking the current restoration. So one of the ways in which we've been able to understand this painting a lot better is through all the scientific analysis that your team has done, Marta. And that's also helped reveal more information about some changes as well.
Yes, as we normally do, we supported your work by analyzing a few very tiny paint samples taken from areas of interest. But in this case, we also investigated the whole painting non-invasively using a technique called X-ray fluorescence scanning. To date, this is the largest National Gallery painting we investigated this way. It took us 140 hours and an epic team effort to do so, but it was very exciting and very useful because the chemical map that we got not only gave us clues on what pigment Orazio used and where, but also revealed some paint passages that are still well hidden below the paint surface. The LED XRF map shows a profile indicating that Orazio initially positioned the head of Moses' mother more to the right. Then he moved the figure a little back, more or less where she is now, but he painted her wearing a headdress. We clearly see some fabric covering her hair and also trailing along her neck. Then this headdress was removed in the final version of the painting.
That's so interesting, and I think it also helps to explain why the head of Moses' mother looks a little bit odd, especially around her neck. You have the increased transparency of oil paint with age, so that upper layer of oil paint has become a little bit more translucent, and we're starting to see that headdress fabric underneath. Silvia, can you tell us a little bit more about the other stages of treatment that happened after the cleaning?
Yes, absolutely. After we removed the varnish and all the restoration layer, the original layers of the painting were exposed, and this allowed us to do some structural treatments. After that, we applied a new layer of varnish, and the new varnish is not useful only to saturate the surface, but also as a separation layer for all the subsequent restoration layers.
Marek, can you tell us a little bit more about the next stage of treatment, the filling, which I think you found particularly rewarding, didn't you?
Yes, so the filling is really a first stage of our restoration process, and we do usually filling to the areas where the original paint and the ground layer has been completely lost and the original canvas support has been exposed. So we usually wouldn't do our retouchings directly on the canvas, but we would bring those areas back to the level of the original paint. It was very important in our filling to replicate that, what we call the texture of the original paint. And so we have done it using very liquid putty, in which we applied relatively small brushes, and that is to replicate the canvas pattern. If the texture wouldn't be right, and even if our color matching were perfect, we would always view it as something disturbing on the surface of the paint, rather than something which will integrate within the original surrounding area.
The texturing is really, really useful, obviously, for this, but we also need color as well, don't we, Silvia?
Absolutely. After the fillings were done, we colored them with this mid-brown color, and it's the same color that Orazio used as a ground layer for the painting. So the brown was usually applied also to enhance some colors. As we can see on the white, they enhance the white, and also the dark colors look deeper on this kind of ground layer. And we chose the specific colors, looking also at the abrasions, like in these areas where we can see the original ground layer showing through. And our approach to the retouching of this painting is not only to imitate the color on the surface, but to build up the layers as they were built during the process of creating the painting.
So now you can see the painting during this process of retouching, but really our approach, like we said earlier, is trying to honor and respect the history of the painting, really leave those deliberate brushstrokes visible as much as possible, even the wear and abrasion to the painting, and also those changes that are really quite crucial to understanding this painting more. Another aspect to the scientific analysis we did on the painting is that we really wanted to understand more about the condition of the painting that it's currently in and what might have happened to the painting over time to make it look the way it does now. And Marta, one of the areas we looked into specifically was the sky, wasn't it?
Yes, our findings there were really fascinating because they showed that Orazio used 3 blue pigments with a different shade to modulate the color of the sky. He started with a base paint layer containing smolt that was left directly visible in certain areas and covered with touches of azurite or natural ultramarine in other places. And the XRF maps really are useful because they show where these different pigments are. The cobalt map in particular helped us to recognize the presence of smolt in certain paint passages, and smolt is a pigment that when mixed in oil tends to lose its beautiful blue color with time, resulting in a paint that looks grey. Which is particularly problematic here because in the sky we also have some clouds that are intentionally painted grey.
So does that help to explain that area up at the top where you've got this really bright passage of blue next to this really large grey area?
Yes, exactly. So the cobalt map shows that what looks grey now contains a lot of smolt, so it would have originally been much bluer. That also means that the paint passages still looking blue, that for the record contain the copper-based pigment azurite, didn't stand out as much originally because they were applied not over grey, but over a blue of a different shade.
So all this information that we've learned through all the scientific analysis has really helped us understand how the painting would have originally appeared and how it's changed subsequently in its history. And it's really guiding us towards how best to retouch the painting and honor the painting's history as well. Something else that's worth emphasizing as well is that all our retouching is on top of the varnish layer, like Silvia said, and so it's very separate from the original paint itself and can be easily removed in the future. So we hope that through this conversation today, we've kind of shown you some of the different aspects through the analysis and the treatment on the painting and how we've really had to focus on a lot of really small details that have come together on one of the largest paintings in our collection. And really, we're trying to aim all this work, we're hoping that it kind of disappears, and when you come and look at the painting in the gallery soon, you'll be able to just enjoy the painting for what it is.